Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I'm going to be talking about 10 book series that I really want to reread. These are generally some of my favourite book series that I've never reread for different reasons. Most of my favourite book series I have reread. I reread The Infernal Devices every year. I reread all of the Shadowhunter books last year. I also reread Hunger Games earlier this year and The Selection. I've been rereading a lot recently. Now that I have no physical TBR and no NetGalley TBR and I only have a few books left on my Kindle to read, I thought I'd just try and prioritise rereading more and kind of reread a favourite series every now and then. So this is just kind of a list for me to follow of some of the favourite series that I want to reread. This is in no particular order, I'm just going to be talking about all 10 of them and why I want to reread them. The first one I'm going to talk about is Vendetta by Catherine Doyle. So this is the first book in the Blood for Blood trilogy. I read this, I want to say 2016, towards the end of 2016. I read it just before the third book came out. I binge read the whole series and I loved it. So this trilogy is kind of under the radar in general. It's sort of portrayed as a Romeo and Juliet retelling in like the mafia world, and it starts off like that in the first book, but as you get further in it just becomes an entirely different thing, and it is just mainly about this mafia family and this girl who gets entwined with this mafia family. This is, I think, the only mafia series I've ever read. It's a UK YA series, so it's British mafia, and I just find it really interesting. I particularly love the second and third book in this trilogy. I feel like it went in a really good direction. It changed quite a bit as the trilogy went on, but it changed in a good way, I think, and I just really want to re-experience the story to see whether I still love it or whether it was just a product of me being 17. So this is the first one I want to reread. This next one I'm going to talk about is not really one of my favourite series, but I just am interested to reread it, and that is Divergent by Veronica Roth. So like everybody, I was obsessed with Divergent at one point. I was very obsessed with this world. I read it when Allegiant hadn't come out yet. I think I read it in the same year that Allegiant was due to come out. No, I read it the year before. So I read this in 2012 and Allegiant came out in 2013, I want to say. So I loved Divergent. I actually really enjoyed Insurgent. A lot of people hate it, but I just didn't like Allegiant at all. And then the films kind of put me off of this series as well. So I'm interested to know whether I actually like this when I reread it, because I don't think I will. This book is also battered, like it's got a broken spine, it's just falling apart. I think it's also signed. Yeah, it's signed and personalised to me. So I will never get rid of this, but I'm interested to reread it to see whether I still like it, because I don't think I will. So, next series is one that I'm itching to reread the most at the moment, and that is Legend by Marie Lu. So I love Marie Lu's books. I particularly love this trilogy and the Warcross duology. I haven't read her other books, to be fair, but I loved this book when I read it. This is like the original cover in the UK. It's really hard to find this cover now. No one ever does this cover, and no one ever has this cover. But I read this in 2012. I went book shopping with a friend and she was like, oh, that's really good. So I bought it and I really liked it. And then I didn't know it was a series. I thought it was just a standalone, because I feel like this book ends in a way that could just be a standalone. When I discovered BookTube the next year, people were talking about Prodigy by Marie Lu, and I was like, oh, I read a book by her. And then I looked on Goodreads, I was like, oh, that's the sequel. So I read the sequel and I read the third one, and I really enjoyed this trilogy, but I think I'd enjoy this more if I binge read the series as a whole. I don't remember much of this series, but I do remember like the right ending, like the twist at the end. And I know that there's now a fourth book in this series and I'm interested to read that, but I don't remember this series well enough to go straight into the fourth book. So I want to reread this because they're also quite short. They're really short books and I think I'll enjoy the reread. The next one I have is Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead. This is one I'm also really itching to reread. So I want to reread all 6 Vampire Academy and then all 6 Bloodlines books, but that is a commitment. That's 12 books to reread, which is a lot. So this might be a 2021 goal, but I just want to binge read this series. I originally read Vampire Academy back in 2013 and I read all 6 of them in a week, and at that point I think only 2 of the Bloodlines books were out, or 3, so I read those, and then I read each of the other Bloodlines books as they came out, and I really enjoyed them, but I just think I want to binge read this series again to see if I like it, because I'm not sure if I will. I'm personally not a huge fan of vampire stories. I'm not a fan of vampires in general. I don't find them that interesting. Maybe that's because I miss the vampire trend in YA, but I'm interested to see whether I still like this, because I don't think I will, but I think I'll like love it for nostalgic reasons. So the next one I have is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So I am dying to reread this. I've been meaning to reread it for ages. I read it last year for the first time, so it hasn't been that long, but I've just been itching to reread it. Though I'm kind of purposefully putting it off because I want to reread this and the Grisha trilogy when we finally get a release date for the TV show, because I want to read them as close as possible to the TV show to see what I feel like the TV show does, like if it's a good adaptation. So I don't know whether to just wait, because I don't know when the TV show will come out. I'm assuming early 2021, because I'm pretty sure they finished filming and then close to it being finished, and they've released like a soundtrack theme, and I'm just adamant to wait for the TV show to reread this. But I really want to reread this because I really want to like annotate it and fall back in love with this series, because I loved this duology in particular. The Greater Trilogy not as much, but this duology I loved. So another one that I'm debating rereading sooner rather than later is Illuminae by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. So I loved this trilogy. I read each book as it came out. I got each book for a review. I was so excited for this trilogy and I loved it, basically. This is really the only sci-fi book that I've loved, and I really want to reread it as a whole to read the trilogy all together, because I read them quite separately without remembering really what had happened in the previous books that much. So I'm interested to reread this to see whether I like it when I read it all together. This will be a really quick reread, like I could literally do like a 24-hour rereading thing for the whole trilogy and finish it all quite quickly. So I'm interested to do that, but I'm not sure whether I'll do it soon or later. Yeah, this is like the only sci-fi series I actually enjoy, so I'm interested to see whether it's just at the time I liked it or whether I will still like it, because I hate sci-fi even more now. So the next series I have is The Sunitas Daughter by Melinda Salisbury. I reread this in September, so I did reread this, and I was going to reread the whole trilogy, but I just decided that I wasn't really in the mood, because I wasn't really in the mood for a fantasy series at the time. But I have been itching to carry on this reread, because at the moment I remember this book quite well because I only reread it in September, so I feel like I should carry on the rest of the trilogy and reread it all, but I'm kind of scared because this is a trilogy that is a big part of my reading, and if I don't like it, I'm going to be really sad. However, I just really love this series and I'm itching to reread it to see whether I still love it as much, and I want to see what happens to Merrick because I can't fully remember, but I love him, so. But yeah, this is one of my favourite trilogies that I'm dying to reread. Another trilogy that I'm dying to reread is The Cruel Prince, or the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black. This is another one that I read only last year for the first time, and I'm really itching to reread it because I want to be back in that world and back addicted to this. The day that I'm filming this is the 23rd of November, and tomorrow in the UK the prequel to this comes out, so I was tempted to reread it for the prequel, but now that's not happening. So I'm gonna see what I think about the prequel and whether to go straight into this reread after I read that, or just reread another series and reread this again at another point. This series is really weird because like I was never designed to like this series. I hate fae books and I haven't liked any of Holly Black's other books, but I just love this trilogy. I don't know why, I just love it, and it's so addictive, and I want to be back addicted to that world, because I don't think I've read a book that's truly as addictive since I read this, because this is like a fantasy world that really drew me in and got me obsessed, so I really want to re-experience that. The next one I have is Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. So I really want to reread the entire Percy Jackson universe. I am very far behind. So I read the 5 Percy Jackson books, the 5 Heroes of Olympus books, and the first Magnus Chase book. And I really want to carry on because I loved the first Magnus Chase book, and I read it when it came out in 2015. And I just never picked up the sequels because I couldn't remember. But I just want to do one massive reread and then finally finish Magnus Chase, which I think is a trilogy, and also read Trials of Apollo, which is the 5 books. So it's a lot of books and I want to reread it to re-experience that story, but it's a commitment. I might reread this in preparation for the series, but that's not coming out for quite a while, I think. They're still developing the script, they're nowhere near filming, so I don't know when I'll reread this. This might be a 2021 thing. I might force myself to reread the entire Rick Riordan universe and also catch up with everything in 2021. I'm not sure. We'll see. But yeah, I really want to reread this. And then finally, the last book I have on this list is a book that only came out this year and I only read this year, but I really want to reread. And that is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. This is the illuminae edition. It's very shiny. I don't know how to hold it without it being really reflective, so we're just going to leave it like that. But this is my favourite book of the year so far. I'm obsessed with it and I really want to reread it, but I think I'm going to wait until we're closer to Chain of Iron, which comes out in March, so I might reread this in February or maybe like the start of March, but I can't remember when Chain of Iron's coming out, if it's the beginning of the month or the end of the month. But I'm going to reread this next year, definitely, to prepare for the sequel, because I loved this book so much, but I don't know if my full attention was on it. When this book came out this year and when I was reading it was when like COVID was going into like full intensity, and we were like really uncertain at that point about what was going to happen with the world. And we weren't on lockdown yet, but it was just kind of like that weird in between stage where like we all knew that we should be doing something like drastic, but we hadn't actually done anything yet. But yeah, so I don't think my full attention was on this book as much as I loved it, so I want to like reread it and fully focus on it because I love this series, I love this world, and I just want to reread it. So those are just some of the book series that I want to reread. Those are generally some of my favourite book series. I wouldn't class Divergent as one of my favourite book series, but it's one I really want to reread to see whether I still like it. Are there any book series that you want to reread? Do you reread books quite frequently? I've been loving rereading books because it's just so comforting to rediscover a world. When I reread The Infernal Devices and Fangirl, it's really comforting because I know those stories quite well and I know it. So it's just kind of like rewatching your favourite film when you know everything that's going to happen. However, these series will be interesting because I know that I loved these and I know like general things that happen, but I don't remember like fully what happens in it, and I'm interested to reread them because it's kind of like rediscovering it in a weird way. I love rereading books, and there are so many books I want to reread. I kind of want to reread like every book I've ever read, but that's not going to happen. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you in my next one.